Anyone new here? First timer want to give a quick intro? See what you how you got to know about us and anything you're looking out from the session. How you got to know about this group?
I found you through a friend. Kind of really interesting the topic, so I decided to check it out today. So that's why I'm here. I just love studying system design. I guess I'm sort of looking for a job and stuff. I'm here to be here, so cool.
And you also got to know me from Meetup? From a friend. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Juan. I just got a job at Meta starting next week. But I was looking through like system design practice around the building area. This came up. I don't know if it was Meetup or
You got from Meetup or?
I think so.
Awesome. Anyone here, first or second timer?
Hi, Sadiq here. I'm a CEO from Microsoft. I got more through my friend. The colleague
I've seen it on jobs. I got to open my phone. I'm really looking forward to learning about generative AI and how to design.
Welcome. Anyone else? Oh, okay.
Carlos, I work as a .NET developer on my so for work, and pretty much I know nothing about LLMs, so you might as well learn something new.
Welcome. So we are a volunteer and community-driven group. We meet every week in different libraries on Saturdays. We all have some online programs as well. We meet in different libraries site. We do different types of sessions, mostly like twice a month, mostly coding, one system design, and then we also have special sessions which could be like mentoring, behavior. Next week we have another session which is totally different from mentoring. Navneet is going to lead it. We'll share more details at the end. And we also encourage everyone to socialize at the end, to share contacts. If you know any job openings, share with others, refer others, so then everyone gets a benefit out of it. Today we are particularly doing a system design session, and this is all about understanding LLMs. We may not be able to cover like a really deep dive on things, and in the past we have seen system design sessions can go wide, can go in any direction. So we have to also moderate. We have to also time ourselves so we can able to cover it by 12:45. And another exciting thing today is we have another guest who has joined us today. His name is Nikhil Shah, and he's going to introduce himself. So he's a hiring manager from Snowflake, and he's here to give a pitch. So I would like to hand it over to Nikhil for his pitch.
Thanks, Asim. Hey, everyone. Good morning. I'm Nikhil Shah. I'm Senior Engineering Manager at Snowflake. I've been working in the Seattle area for almost 20 years now. So prior to Snowflake, I spent 10 years in AWS, working S3. So I was leading S3 Index specifically. I built a couple of AI services for AWS Health Lake, Component Medical within the healthcare vertical. Also built like some of the core Kindle rendering engines. Prior to that, I worked at Microsoft for a few years, Expedia, and some of the startups in the area. In Snowflake, I head the engineering for Snowflake streaming. So specifically, we have a team of like 60 plus engineers. We're building the products within the data engineering space, ranging from like data ingestion, data transformation, and telemetry. We're looking to grow the team across the board. We are looking to hire primarily SD2s, senior SDs, principal SDs, even senior principal SDs. Also engineering managers, senior engineering managers. So if any of you are looking for jobs or want to network where I can help. I used to be bar at Amazon. I've done more than 1,000+ interviews. So I can be any help for this community. Happy to do that. Specifically, it's exciting time to be at Snowflake, where Snowflake is seeing exponential growth to the existing products. Because as you can imagine, like we are in the core data business, infrastructure business. AI boom is naturally kind of beneficial for Snowflake. So existing products are seeing growth, as well as we are building a lot of new 0 to 1 products. So the opportunities are primarily experience working on data, infrastructure, distributed systems, query processing, streaming, all of these cutting edge technologies. If you have prior background, that's preferential. If you do not have prior background, but you have like a strong computer science fundamentals background, that's also something that I'd be happy to kind of get you through the referrals and through the recruiting process. If you have any questions, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I can just kind of drop my handle here. I'm not going to be hanging around for the whole session, but just wanted to take a few minutes, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you're interested in learning more about Snowflake.
So how they can reach out to you via LinkedIn?
Yes, LinkedIn, or I can drop my email here.
So are you fine if we put that in the chat?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. So I will put his LinkedIn profile in the meetup chat. So you can get hold of that, and if you want to reach out to Nikhil, feel free to reach out to him with any questions.
Yeah, so this is my Snowflake email address. You can use that, or you can find me on LinkedIn. You just search for Snowflake. You can find me. Have a great session, guys.
Okay,
Thanks for
thank
the
you
session.
Thanks so much. So, morning. So today we have a bigger group. So if you are not able to hear, or we may need to squeeze people in. But if people on that corner could not be able to hear, just let us know. We'll then see how we can everyone can squeeze.
Feel free to say. Other stuff. One question only, and then say, what people call? My people.
Okay, so I think people who just joined, we had a hiring manager from Snowflake. He's looking for engineers, SPMs, and other roles. So feel free to grab his email, reach out to him if you want to get referred at Snowflake. So with this, we will move towards this session for today. We are going to live stream it. If anyone has any objection, please let me know, then we won't do it. We are planning to live stream it. It will be on our YouTube channel. If anyone has concerns, we can skip that.
Already.
Huh?
I'm already doing it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Great. I have a disclaimer. I have asked. Okay. With this, I would like to introduce Pooja. Pooja is a backend engineer from Amazon, and she's working on a lot of robotics things. In the past, I have only met few people who told me like whatever we do is coding problems, optimization, lead code problems, binary search or something, which I never used in my day-to-day software engineer life, but she has used it, so that was exciting. And now she's also passionate about AI in general. So with this, I would like to hand it over. I think Pooja wants to make it as a interactive session so people can chime in if they want, but we also want to moderate it because we want to wrap it by 12:45. Pooja has a few things on the agenda. We want to make sure everything we cover. And
Oh,
this will be first of the session. There will be more sessions coming in regarding this. So there could be continuation around these sessions. Pooja.
Hi everyone, as Asim said, my name is Pooja.
This first thing in the meetup live
So
stream.
let's hope in this session you actually have takeaways from this. I do want to explicitly call out is that I am not an expert on this subject. I don't even use it at the moment in my career, but I'm passionate about it, and I thought, frankly, like if you go look at job searches, everyone's talking about Gemini, right? So I found collectively people also. So I may say some things wrong. If you have more information, then I would want to correct me for something with knowledge. Please do that because this is a collectively learning session. It's not like one is an expert over the other. And as Asim said, it's a very wide topic to even comprehend. So I am planning a multi-part series for this because as I am learning, I would like to share my learnings with everyone as well. So with this today's session, I thought we could begin with just at least at some level of a higher level understanding of how LLMs even work. You may not have to ever build it in your career, of course, but I feel like to use any technology, understanding of that technology to some extent is always helpful. Like if you don't know how data issues work at all, or you don't know how S3 works, you can't really use it, right? Just the APIs are not sufficient. So let's just quickly dive a little into how LLMs work. What are these terms like reinforcement learning, transformer learning? When everyone kept saying transformer, I could only think of like a electrical transformer that can use voltage change. So I thought let's talk about that a little. I have a little understanding of how ChatGPT, like as an application, is working. I must confess that I don't know like the full-blown system of it, like to the T. And like I said, I will educate myself more. We will have further sessions. One of the things we will touch upon briefly is how the middle-level application layer really works, which is what is giving rise to this newfound role or newfound era of a responsibility called prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is not entirely new. It has been there in the technology world for a very long time, especially for as long as chatbots and NLU has existed. But it has gotten much more interest and advancement as companies and teams are continually investing in building applications on top of LLM. Not many companies are building their own LLMs, but it's all about like how do you expand the use. So we will have a separate session on how do you actually build applications and what kind of system considerations we would want to make to build a full-blown application. May not go into as much depth today, but if anyone of you have any information about it, please stand up, help me out as well, and we can all learn and grow together. With that, let's just get started. So as I mentioned, the first thing I ever heard about, and as Asim said, I personally don't come from science background as much as my team does. So like everyone in my team, all the scientists were like, oh yeah, LLMs use transformer. And I'm like, what is a transformer? Like, can someone please dumb it down for me? Really. And what I understood about transformers, and like based on my reading, is transformers are these deep learning and RL-based models. RL is reinforcement learning, but transformers are essentially neural networks. We've all heard about neural networks at some point of time, whether we use them or not. But what transformers are essentially used for, and they have been around in NLU forever, natural language understanding and processing, is that it is responsible for sequentially understanding data. So when I talk about a cat sat on the mat, right? What the transformer is actually doing is when I give the transformer so when I say a cat sat on the mat, this is a whole sequence from a machine perspective. What is it? It is nothing but sequence of words, a sequence of tokens, right? And this knowledge is what the model educates it educates itself or trains itself upon. So when you pass a sentence like this to a transformer unit, what it is doing is it is picking some keywords. I think it is called self-attention. So what it is doing is it is picking some keywords like a cat
sat, and mat. This is what gives it an understanding of the relation between these words. Now, a cat can sit on a tree, right? A cat can sit on a highway, and then you give such multiple occurrences or instances of a sentence, and what it is doing internally is it is literally as how we all learn language in our life, like in the years that we've been alive, is that we learn to develop these relationships between words based on a lot of contextual information. Like, you cannot build sentences, you cannot generate information without context, correct? And that might be something that you might have observed even with ChatGPT. Like, you tell ChatGPT, help me write an application for a leave, right, at office. It'll give you some response. Then you tell ChatGPT, help me write an application for a sick leave. It will give you another. Sick leave because I am down with something, or I need it for so many days. I want to care for family. And the more you give it context, the more it gets better at its responses to you, and you feel like, okay, now this is doing a better job. This sounds more like me. This is something I could probably paste in my email. Now, how was that developed? Is that internally, all of these words are nothing but a bunch of numbers. Okay, like that's pretty much like every deep learning model, right? Layers and layers of parameters. So as they kept feeding more information to the model started developing these relationships and what they call the parameters. Like, I think ChatGPT 4 at the moment has got 10 billion parameters. Then that is why it is like the largest language model ever made in the world. Is that as I kept feeding, like even as a person, if I was to build my own model, like the really small model, as I will keep giving it, like the cat sat on a mat, the cat sat on a tree, Alice sat on a mat, Alice danced on a mat, it will start developing these sequential information for itself to understand that, okay, so when someone says cat sat on the mat, I'll probably not say cooker, will I? Like, can't sit on a stove. It's probably incorrect, correct? So this is how transformers in general, transformers are nothing but neural networks that accept sequential information, and they develop sequential information. So generative AI, so all this while, right, in the industry, what we had were natural language processing and natural language understanding models. They could understand the sequence of information. They could interpret what to come out of it. But then generating AI, generating text is another thing, correct? So just like the transformer, so there is like a input-output format, right? So when you pass it a natural language sentence, the transformer encodes it first, correct, into tokens that it can use to generate these, parameters or connections, if you will. And then, once it has educated itself ample amount of time, it is then using the same information to generate information. Which means, if tomorrow I give it something like a cat sat on, it has a number of varied answers it can pick from. Now, initially it would come up with like these random fill-in-the-blank words, correct? Like, and it could be anything, really. But then, as we keep training the model more and more, it keeps learning that there are a handful of words that can fit appropriately over here. This is the amount of work that the OpenAI guys have done over the years that now we can like very happily use, right? And there goes a lot of work in the training. So if you like this in general is how LLMs overall work. I personally don't understand 100% how the visual language model works, which is what DAL-E is, if anyone has seen it or heard it or used it, the image generation feature that ChatGPT. But it is, if you think about it, it is similar because, and image is also a language. It is eventually nothing but a number, right? So if you ask someone to generate an image or even to consume an image, we've been in a world where we have been processing images for like decades now, right? And images, when it like dumb it down to a machine language, is nothing but like bits that are arranged in sequence, and machine models have been understanding how these bits fit together to create a particular thing, like a cat or a dog. Like, how do you interpret that this is a block or a table, correct? So a similar kind of So you may like for an image, it would be like you would have some additional image processing, but then you do provide it to a transformer-based model, essentially. This transformer is the key building block for any LLM. Like without it, an LLM cannot be built unless there is a new technology that comes up, and then we will all see. But at the moment, as it stands where we are at, this is what the key is. Does anyone have any questions about anything that I've said so far before we get into like a little detail about how GPT's LLM is being built?
I am curious if anyone in the audience knows how multimodal models encode images or tokenize images.
I do not, but I can speak a little about how I have seen images being consumed in like convolution neural networks. Because convolution, so what they do is images have intensity values, right? When you go for like colored images or even black and white images, every cell has a number from 0 to 255, correct? And then the sequence of numbers are what gets in, because something like a deep neural network really does not expose itself, its inner workings in a way, right? Like you put these building blocks and it's like learning by itself, which to me is very scary, frankly. Like I don't know what this is doing internally, but like to answer your question, I don't know if it is a sufficient answer, but images are tokenized eventually into a number, just like every token in a language would be encoded in a number. So the whole image, and again, that is where the sequence matters, right? Like if you have a full image, the sequence of where that particular value of a pixel is encodes how the whole image of maybe a cat gets generated. So it is these numbers that are like you strip off the color. Color has its own luminosity, so there is an RGB, and then there is an A in like images in general. So your RGB will give it the color, and the A is what I was talking about, the 0 to 255. And then the position of them is what gets encoded into a number that is then used. And that is where like this whole block of like a convolution neural network comes into place that interprets images. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I think there's also a little breaks in the tiles. You know, you have pixel level, and then there's tiles, or kind of larger units, and then it kind of layer by layer creates a connection between them.
You are right. Yeah.
I looked at the other day and think that double check.
Well, so real quick, fundamentally they're doing the same thing, right? So this is tokenizing the words, right? It does a dictionary numeric assignment. A number to a word is what we are highlighting here. The same is true for pixels, right? It's just their numeric values. It's a three-dimensional tensor instead of two. And the right way to think about these really is in any neural network, what you're processing ultimately is not images or text or some other thing, it's a signal space, right? Like everything coming in is just a numeric value, and what a neural network is, it's a computation machine, it's an equation generator, right? So if you look at the graph, it's that number of nodes, that number of power, that number of connections is set by the data, is the number of equations it's going to generate. It's essentially y equals mx plus b, where b is the weighting, right? And that's the value it gets out. And it's doing a backprop using mathematical derivatives. That's like slightly more technical, but not that much. Fundamentally, it's a signal space. And it's just, and if you were to plot like the values of the equations, you're just getting millions and millions of little angles. Is essentially what you're getting, what it's going to look like if you're to plot it. And that's all it is, right? So this is really, it's like in computing, anything that becomes really well known or really popular, ultimately at the end of the day, is super simple. And at first blush, it looks complicated.
Yes, I appreciate that. That is, and I think that is how also like it becomes like, as you mentioned, the whole neural network that uses backpropagation is the key component. Everything else is just about transforming it into a signal, as you mentioned. So whether it be text, images, and I have heard that, I don't know, GPT or someone's coming up with voice as well. that's the word on the street, that then now you can give it voice prompts instead of actually text it. So it's going to have an additional step of processing there where orally said statement will have to be first converted to text into tokens, and then it will be used. And but yes, thank you, I appreciate it. So a few of the keywords I heard here, read across, and I've made some notes while I was studying about this. And once again, I don't know how helpful it would really be in interviews, but sometimes interviewers, especially depending on the level that they are, they like to hear jargons. So I'm just going to mention them here. So when we talk about transformers in general, the two keywords that I read about was attention mechanism and self-attention. So attention mechanism is what we were talking about, a cat on the mat. Cat sat on the mat to build the context on it, right? Because there will come a sentence after this. Imagine when you read a book, you read one sentence, and then you retain some information of that one sentence, and then when you move to the next sentence, the contextual information that you just got from the previous sentence helps you build the story in your head further. But if you were just to read these sentences independent of each other, it would absolutely make no sense. So attention mechanism is to provide attention, picking the mechanism to pick the words that you think are, in words you can say weighting, giving them more weight, as in on is probably lesser important than these words here, right? The second word that I read about was self-attention. So while the attention mechanism is picking the words, self-attention is actually the mechanism of sequencing them, or rather creating these relationships between them. So it says that it provides, self-attention is the mechanism to provide weights to one word with respect to other, which means that if I have a cat as my word, which are the words that would have higher weight when I want to use it with, versus which would have lower weight? Like I said, if we use cat and sat, right? Like I said, we would probably never use a star as a word that would go with it. So it would automatically have a lower weight, and some other words that are more likely where a cat can sit would have a higher weight. So this is what self-attention is. And then, of course, there is the transformer blocks, which is this whole neural network that uses backpropagation, as you just mentioned. You have multiple layers. I think GPT-4 has 96 layers or more of these blocks being put together, and that is what builds your whole LLM. All right. Any other questions before we move forward? Okay, sounds like no. So then the next thing I tried to understand was to do with large language models. It's been part of natural language. How do they apply more in terms of large language models itself? So the difference is that large language models, as the name suggests, trains the model on a large, extremely large data set, which is what GPT did. It fed this model books, everything off of the internet, dictionaries, God knows, it is massive, the amount of data that was provided to the model. And that is why the size of the model is much higher too. And then the parameters that were generated out of it makes large language model give it the ability that it has. And now when you have consumed the expansive knowledge that these large language models have consumed, then prediction of what comes next becomes easier. Because if I was a person, if in my lifespan, I can read every content out there that is there, except that my writing style isn't that great, but I may be able to write an essay. Because I just know the number of words that are out there. I just know how words fit in together. I just know which words do not fit in together. So to begin with, these large language models, they have just consumed a lot of information to train themselves. And that's just the first part of it, really. And that's really what, that is something that, frankly, from an engineering perspective, needs a lot of time, energy, and money. Money for sure. Just think about the compute, because the scale at which this data is getting consumed and the scale at which the compute needs to run to be able to do this. And that is actually the truth for any kind of a deep learning model. So now what happens in the industry is that every other model will pick a pre-trained model, and then you will work on tuning it, honing it to suit your purpose. And but ChatGPT is still very generic, but all other companies, when they are investing their time and effort and money to build their own LLMs, they're not really building everything from scratch. We take a pre-trained model, we start tuning it further, and then we use it. So thinking about how these LLMs would be, right? So we spoke about how does it work in terms of a large language model is that the first set of transformer block will interpret it will pick these keywords that we spoke about using self-attention and attention mechanism. Then it feeds its interpretation to another layer. That feeds its interpretation to another layer. And that is how the strength between these words keep increasing. So I may have like a 1:1, what do you call it, like a 1:1 weight for all of them. But then as I keep reading more text and I keep giving it to the next level, it keeps making it more specific, more specific. Now, if we look at this one diagram that, that we have for how GPT has trained itself, right? ByteByteGo takes the credit for building this diagram. But overall, what they did was, it's a very interesting, like historically how they built it, to me it's very interesting, and this I will be sharing it with you. And I think it is important to understand this, because frankly, when anyone says that okay, we're going to build a generative AI-based application, we really need to understand what tuning is. We really need to understand what goes into tuning these models, what are the important considerations being made, because you just cannot use a model out of the box. My personal experience, I was playing around with the GPT API. If you take the pro version, you get it. And they have this thing where you can build your own GPT. Now, I wanted to build a GPT for a very tailored use case for myself. It is funny, actually. I said, okay, and I was like, but I don't know content ideas. I know what my target audience is. I know what kind of things I want to focus on. But A, I need help with the ideas. B, I need help with hashtags. So it was literally, I went to GPT Builder and they were like, okay, what is it that you're looking for? I gave it a few words. It interpreted my request. It came back saying, okay, so my model will do these things for you. Is there something more you want? And I said, okay, let's remove this part. I do not want this. This is my target audience. What I am doing, really, when at a high level abstraction, is that I'm tuning the model to provide the outputs that I needed to do. So when I tell it, go give me a new idea for like a content, I don't want it to give me a bakery content, because that's not really what I want. So I tuned my model to do it. Very recently, I came across this thing where Chevrolet uses OpenAI as their chatbot, like the background, and someone actually asked it in the chatbot to solve some equation. Now it's a Chevrolet chatbot, okay? What it should do is just provide you information, like interpret questions that are related to the company and give you back information, like a related information. Everything else should not really be part of the application that I built. Looks like someone probably missed it out, and people started using it as a non-paid version of ChatGPT. So I don't have to pay for it, but they are going to use ChatGPT for, and I can just use it for solving all of my problems, and I don't have to pay $20 for it. Of course, they came to know because this became news, and then they shut down. But that is the whole beauty of prompt engineering. And like I said, we will cover another session on like what are the things to keep in mind, what are the things to eliminate. But that is about fine tuning. So now what GPT did was, first they just asked it to consume all the text. Okay, and text can have biases, because eventually everything that you get on the internet has biases. It does require moderation. And also we need to tailor it to the audience that is listening to it, right? So a very good example that I read about is that, okay, now I have a model who has consumed all of this information. And miraculously, it also has a way to create answers to it. But I can't just throw it out in the world, because it could be catastrophic, what it gives, right? And it is a machine after all. It's not sentient, hopefully never, but not yet, correct? So how they tuned their whole model is that they picked this huge model that they have, and then they use labelers. Now, any model cannot be completely unsupervised. Unsupervised learning is still like a realm of ML that is, it's quite evasive from time and again. So for this one, they actually used supervised learning. And how they did was, they picked a set of prompts because they wanted to pick a small data set. Now these prompts were some things based on research, right? And this is like an ongoing training process that GPT keeps going over. That is how 3.5, and then 4, and then we'll have 4. So they not only keep adding more data to it, like if you're in 3.5, you may hear, like you may read this reply, oh, as of Jan 2022, this is what I know. Why? Because it doesn't have information for 23, which they poured in GPT-4. But so as it keeps in ChatGPT, they had human labelers. They provided the same prompt. So let's just assume all of us over here are labelers for ChatGPT, right? We're teaching it how to talk to people. So we picked up one question. What is the color of the sky? Right? And every person, every human person was supposed to give their own prompt to it. As a person, what is the different, what is an answer that I come up with? This information was then kept, and I just actually even fed to the model that when someone is asking me, what is the color of the sky? This is the answer I provide. So now you have a varied set of people providing an answer that is acceptable, you would say, because I'm hoping they were all vetted out, right? But what is a human expecting as an answer? And this also becomes, and why we call it a supervised learning is because in supervised learning, you have the question, you also have an answer. So the model is learning from your answers. That, okay, what's a good answer, what is not a good answer? And so then they learned, but then they didn't stop there. They did something called as reinforcement learning with human feedback. And what that means is that, okay, now I know this, all right? Now I give the same prompt to the model, and I'll tell it, okay, give me 10 replies to the same question. What is the color of the sky? And you might have experienced that with ChatGPT. It never gives the same answer again if you keep asking it the same question over and over and over again. It always has a different answer. And that makes sense because it is not reading from a script. It is generating those tokens every time. So every time the parameter values move a little, and it has like these 10 billion parameters, right? So every time it will come up with a new answer. But then they again use these labelers, imagine all of us, and they said, why don't you rank these answers for me? And so then this collected data of ranking becomes a reward model for the model itself. Now, the reason I'm even talking about this is, in my understanding, and it may be absolutely incorrect, but this is something that we will also have to do as users of the technology. Like, if I am Nike, and if my chatbot is using OpenAI, if I tell OpenAI, like if the API gives me a response, I want to tell the model that this is not okay. That like if some customer comes and asks the chatbot, oh, so I want to buy basketball shoes, and what are the options? I do not want it to give answers from my competitors' information. I want to make sure that it is only giving knowledge from Nike, right? And this is how we will also, we may need to tune it. I say may because I do not have the understanding of the specifics, and we will cover that next time. But so these reward models are now what are being used by the model to know that, okay, if I say the sky is blue, this got like an average rating of 2.5. But then when I said the sky is a lovely shade of cerulean or something, it got like 10. So I'm going to use this, right? So that's like literally the reward model that it uses. And then there is another concept called PPO. I try to understand it. I don't understand it 100% because it is in the realm of reinforcement learning, something I do not have a lot of understanding about. But from what I read is, and what I know of reinforcement learning, overall reinforcement learning, and I remember there is this video. It's a brilliant, brilliant video, Carnegie Mellon University. You should check it out. It's a robot where the robot is learning how to catch a ball. So you throw a ball at it. It will try to catch it, doesn't. It drops. Now it takes all the information that it learned. They have cameras everywhere. So then, it reads into that information from the camera for you to understand what the trajectory of the ball was. Where was it coming? This is what all of us do in our mind without giving it due credit. So reinforcement learning is like you keep failing and you keep taking the reward out of that failure to keep improving your policy, to keep improving your accuracy. And that is what ChatGPT does today. So it has this reward model, correct? It knows what are good answers versus not good answers. And then it gives you that answers. and then you also give it a feedback. You give it a feedback that I want it to be tweaked as such. I like it, I don't like it, this is not meeting my, like what I wanted. And it also, it takes your feedback, it also compares it against the reward model. Where does it fit in the whole reward model? And that's how it keeps self-learning and it keeps getting better. So that's the whole idea of how GPT 3.5 or GPT 4 works, is at least based on my understanding of the truth. Any questions, comments?
I have a question. So that fine tuning part, that's always ongoing.
It is ongoing, yes.
So pre-training.
The pre-training only happened once. So I actually read about that. So this whole like the massive text of data thing, like the ingestion, happened once for 3.5, and then like for 4 they did a little more. But I was actually even reading for 4, they did not really like create a brand new, right? They took 3.5 and they took like the difference of the knowledge that it had not consumed until then, and then they gave it to the model. But the fine tuning is, PPO is an online policy. By online, what it means is that you don't go and look into what I had used in the past, but you provide a result, you immediately run it against the reward model, you see what reward it is getting, and you take the signal from the user and you improve itself.
What is the word you said?
PPO, it's called, wait, I have the word here. Okay, sorry, give me 1 second. I think I have it somewhere. Some policy optimization. Proximal policy optimization. Thank you guys. Yes. So because it is, in addition to just this policy, I think it also does some things like, I was reading about it, so one, did I? You want to add it to think here. There is another thing I can put on the Discord server, where they have like gone into much more depth scientifically about it, even PPO in general. I just thought of keeping it brief because I didn't know how many on the audience would be interested. But like it also takes regions into consideration. So that is where system design also gets interesting, right? Like when I'm asking for a question about something, I do not want an answer from like an entirely different region that is unrelated to me. And that is exactly where, like one thing that I want to make abundantly, like I want to iterate over is that context is the key. Context is the key even to create your applications based on Gen AI. Because without context, these LLM models cannot work. They heavily rely on prompts to be able to generate the content. And content without context is impossible. If today, let's just think about a system design interview question, right? If someone tells you, design ChatGPT, and you have absolutely no clue of what ChatGPT is, can you just go ahead and design it? Like, no, right? We ask some clarifying questions to the interviewer, like, what are the things you want to focus on? Can you tell me what a ChatGPT is? I have been in interviews when they have asked me to design a system, I have no clue what this thing even is. So like I have to tell them, can you just at least tell me what this system is? I'm sorry, but I don't know about it, right? So context is important, and context is what drives these models to get better or to be as good as they are. I think we'll wrap up soon.
Okay, that's fine.
Maybe. We'll see.
And if you have a question, you can also repeat from the audience.
Yes. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Is there more fun stuff about your Instagram fine-tuning model that you can share?
I can share a little because I only built it like yesterday and I used it a bit. So fun stuff. One interesting thing that I observed, and I think it's because of DALL-E, is that what it said it will also do, I've not used it so much extensively yet, is that I can upload my image and then it will provide a caption based on it. And isn't that amazing? Like for a model to interpret your, and of course it's not going to do a good job at the beginning. Let's just accept it. Why I say that is that it cannot read my mind. So it will interpret the caption of the image based on what it is seeing, but I may be wanting to provide, like I have something in my mind that I wanted to provide, right? So we will hone on it. But what I really enjoyed was that I told it to, so for the record, I create like, I knit, so I create knitwear for myself and friends and family. So actually, this told it, okay, can you give me Instagram post ideas for a knitwear brand? And it was actually pretty good because it told me, you can come up with a post about like from start of like just it being yarn to a finished garment. And I was like, wow, it is brilliant. And it came up, then I said, okay, give me hashtags. So it has been consuming all of this information. So it, and the whole, the GPT itself that I was talking about. So it was interesting because when I started, I said, okay, I want to build Instagram handle manager for myself. This was literally the words that I used. And I thought it's consumed enough information to know what I'm talking about. So it came up with like a fancy name for itself. It even generated an image for the whole model. So I have like, I'm happy to share it with anyone if they're like just curious to see how it was built. But it generated its own image for this new model that is just going to work for my own purpose. And then it also provided me prompts. Like I said, like, okay, so these are the things that you can ask it. Like, what do you, as an application, if you go to that application now, and there are actually several GPT applications. One of the things widely used in my org by my team members is there's a white paper GPT. So you give it the white paper, because white papers are hard to read, like 10 pages of extreme science, and then just give it and say, over here, this application, now as soon as you go to this application to use it, it tells you, here are the prompts that you can use to build it for me. And for now, I've kept it generic, but I'm going to be a little more stern about what I can let it answer and what not. So, but that's just been my journey so far. I'll share more as I keep working on it.
So, you know how we're talking about how like images are like encoded as numbers, right?
Yes.
So when I was using ChatGPT with Chrome, so when you can upload documents, right? So
Yes.
I uploaded like a short book that had a cover like image. And I said, can you please display the image for me? And it said, no, I cannot do this because I cannot like fully replicate the image. So do you know why that happens? Because shouldn't it just take the encoding of the image and just like display it again? It
So you're saying the book had a cover, correct? And the book, and there was also text about the book. Is that accurate? And what was the prompt?
I just said, oh, show me the cover page of the book. The cover.
Ah, I see. So I think, and this is again thing, I can't really say. Sorry, yes. So the question here that Meda asked is that she once tried with ChatGPT and the pro version, because I don't think the image is available in the free one, is that she uploaded a short book along with the book's cover. And she asked it to provide back the same cover image. Is that accurate? Yes. And ChatGPT responded that it cannot do that. It cannot replicate the image, right? So there are two things here. I was reading about this too, and I was going to cover a bit of it in the next part, is that there's something about copyrights and moderation, right? So if you give it a book cover, and if you ask it to replicate cover, what GPT is doing is it is generating a content which is exactly the same as someone else's content. And that is copyright infringement. That cannot be allowed. So it may not necessarily be a limitation at the end of the model, but there are layers, the application layers that govern and moderate information that we're not allowed to do it, which is actually the second part, if you see in the figure that we have right there, where there is an answer to the prompt part, right? So this is one thing that I think that like the moderation itself wouldn't allow it to give back the exact same replica, because now think about it, tomorrow, I mean, there's already if you hear, there are concerns in the world, right, about how do you know that this book was from an authentic, it's just like machine generated art, and then how do you claim credit for such art? Like I as an interior designer, if tomorrow I come up with like a pattern of how do you make XYZ, but it is not really I asked the model to build it for me, can I claim any kind of credit for it, right? The second that I think is that, as we discussed, these models don't really understand, they don't interpret image the way we do. All they are doing is building these connections between pixels, correct? So, and it is being trained, for it is just another picture. But to be replicating the same image means fine-tuning it to a great extent, but that's not what models do to avoid bias. So I think it may be part that they generate, but they can't copy, because it will have its own interpretation of what different pixels get put in together. And it is also moderation that would not allow it to replicate something.
Do you know why it's different for text? Like if I say, can you please give me the first paragraph, it will
It does?
the exact paragraph.
Okay, so then I do not. Yeah, but that's a very interesting question. The question she asks is that she has had the same experience with text instead. Where it said where she provides a certain text and it asks it to give it back and it does. So why is it that it cannot happen with image? Then it makes me think that maybe it is less to do with moderation and maybe more to do with the model itself.
But does it detect the image? Because it's not going to be like a PNG, right? Or a JPG.
No, it might have been, yeah, it's an image format. So it did detect the image, it just refused to replicate it for her.
But she said she just uploaded the PDF, right?
I uploaded the PDF and a separate cover.
Oh, it's a separate cover image. So it is an image, but it did not, it failed to. I'm actually going to try this today. Thank you. I'm going to see what happens. And then maybe we can ask him, like, why couldn't you let me replicate it?
No, that was actually there as a beta, but then they pulled it out.
Oh, they did?
Yes, now only DALI is the only model that can create images.
Oh, wait, so are you saying they had a separate model initially?
Yes, there was a beta testing that they had released where they can give images and like ask it to create. I was using it to generate some physics equations out of images. It was doing that there.
Oh,
now they haven't taken it out.
Oh, so they don't allow it anymore.
Yes.
But this is not the same as what the other thing that it does, right? Where it's the thing that I was telling it, take my Instagram image and generate a caption. That is so different.
Yeah, text is okay. It cannot generate image in the ChatGPT version.
It cannot generate, but DALI does that, right?
DALI, that we have to go and change it in the DALI. But DALI will not take instruction from an image, it will take instruction as one.
From text only. That actually brings to a very, very interesting point. I'm glad you mentioned this, is that, and we mentioned that in the functional requirement, and this is something I actually learned recently, is that it's not a one model fits all. Like, it's not just one model. So even when you are creating your applications on top of like these models, I in my ignorance until now thought like, okay, there's this one model in OpenAI. I just tell OpenAI, do this for me, and it's going to do all of it. And I was like, how in the world? But only to realize that it is not that, what he just mentioned. There is a text generation and a text interpretation model. There is an entirely different model that is exclusively working with images. That is, I think it only accepts text and then it does the output, correct? Okay, so then it is a different model. DALI is not the same, and DALI is actually the first OpenAI model. Like, fun fact, I was aware of 2 years ago because my organization had a lot of people who just love science, so they would like keep posting these funky images of cats on. We actually had cats on skateboards for the longest time. It became everyone's that it is right now. Oh, by the way, ChatGPT apparently is the most widely used app at the moment in the world. If someone did not, in the first month itself, it surpassed every other API. It had like some 1 million users, which I read that Instagram took 2 years to get. So yeah, pretty good time maybe he's on OpenAI. I don't know. But anyway, yes, there are different models for different with different capabilities. So if you have to build your application, you have to use the right model. I think my Instagram manager uses the previous one. It doesn't use DALI because it interprets images and then it comes up with text. I'm not asking it to generate images for myself. If I had to do that, I would have to probably build a separate application, and I would point. Let's actually, when we're talking about it, can someone like think about how would you like if you were to build an application? Like, can you cumulatively think about an application, right? Where then we actually start picking the models. So like we can talk about ChatGPT and how it works a little more in detail, or we can like cumulatively think about how would you build a system. Like I said, we will cover like the prompt engineering part next time, but how would you build a system where, let's say, the model is available for you? You have to do nothing about it. But what is going to be your whole application layer here? What are the things that you would take into consideration? And this I had not prepared for, frankly, so that's why I wanted to be more like, let's just do it more inclusively. But how is it that it's going to be? We just discussed that there are already 2 different models, right? So what would your application layer really look like? And let's begin, like, if anyone has ideas of an application that we can talk about right now.
I'm building an application right now.
Okay.
So the answer is like there is this exam, competitive exam in India called NEET.
Right.
So there are so many question banks that are available, and not all the students get them. Only those who go to the
Fancy, yeah.
right. So I'm trying to extract these questions and previous year question papers, and I'm trying to ask the GPT to explain it to like different layers of like, if a person is like from like 10 students, how it will explain it to them and stuff like that.
I see. So what is your,
So the input is question, physics, biology, or chemistry question,
okay,
and output needs to be a explanation of the question
okay. So I'm just gonna repeat
with solution.
what you just mentioned, especially because black better. So I'm just going to repeat a little about the use case that it was just mentioned, is that, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name?
Satish.
Satish. So Satish is building an application. The origin of the idea is that in India, we have like these competitive examinations, and everyone prepares for these competitive examinations because these are gateway to get into colleges, but not everyone has the access to the bank of information, because of course, that's how all prep schools work, don't they? So he is trying to acquire all of this information and then feed it. Is that accurate? So are you building it as a separate application altogether and using the OpenAI or some LLM in the background? Okay. So the input over here is like, think of a question bank of all the questions ever asked in these examinations. And these examinations cover a multitude of subjects. There's physics, chemistry, math, biology, maybe even. It's been decades ago when I studied these. But, and then it's hard, because physics was very hard for me, guys, when I was studying it. So now, the best thing that I like about GPT in general is, I did that for transformers. I said, explain transformers to a 5-year-old, to a 10-year-old. And that is literally how I think have had fed itself. But
Yeah, it does. Like right now, I'm just giving the question, and I need it to explain it to me in a dumbed down version of it.
So then your application would probably always give a dumbed down thing, is that true? Like as an end user, what will I get? Will it always get the dumbed down?
The answers and the explanation of like what exactly is.
So you are tuning your model to always give a very easy to understand English language, plain language answers. Is that correct?
Yes.
This is a great, yeah, this is a great application, right? So think,
who is going to use it?
I will. I would have.
No. Like you could be like, this would be like by your interest you will look, but you're not going to.
But in general as a user. So yeah, this is a great.
You won't be going for a competitive exam, but there could be someone who would be going for a competitive exam, and then there would be corner cases. Then it won't be like a good to know. It would be more like a cracking exam also out of it.
So let's talk about, so I think the few things that we want to talk about over here is, what's your user? Correct? What does your user look like? Is that what
Yeah, and like competitive exam paper or any exam paper, and should explain me in a easy way.
Okay, so you are saying that probably in the input, I would also take the whole exam paper, or would it just be a question?
It's just a question.
Or let's say it's a question.
Okay, so this in itself is a system design consideration, correct? That what is your, because what you are building is this. What people are going to interact is with this.
Yeah, they're not going to interact.
And then there is going to be some model here. And then there is going to be like a database.
I'm pretty sure like 50% audience from this room might have already thought about building an application without knowing how these models work. So it should do its own job, but I should make a job out of it.
Correct. And that is what the world is going towards, right? Like every company is, like you mentioned, we are not having to learn what the model does or build a new model, but I have this thing, I just want to use it and build one, right? So in our case now, the question is, what are the inputs, acceptable inputs for our API? So is it the whole paper, right? Is it the whole paper, meaning is it just text or an image? One point of consideration.
The thing is, if you orientate it on the paper, you're orientating for the system and not your individual customer. Your individual customer, you don't know about them ahead of time.
Okay.
To what they know. The question artifact becomes atomic, right? They're telling you what they don't know. And so you build it up very organically. So I would just argue that it makes more sense to start with a question. And then what would be cool, like if it's more an actual product, right? Like a 2.0 or 1.0.
You're trying to learn, and then I tailor my answers. Yeah?
And because you might, I don't know about India, but I've heard a little bit from my colleagues about maybe you go into one area of discipline, maybe you fail. So maybe you go to a second or a third, or you want to do a multidisciplinary kind of degree. Those are really hot, right?
Yeah.
You get good output. So in that sense, it's really hard to have a static kind of structure. And then, so we make it.
So more hierarchical.
Well, no, if you make it very atomic and very organic, and then you can add in these other features like learning tracking later.
Okay, that's fair. So then what we're talking about is that our core competency would be to be able, and this is what I think primarily that you're building, the core, in its core, the competency is to take these questions, these crazy physics, chemistry, math questions, and then give back the answer in a simpler manner that they think can be interpreted. Now, having said that, that's when so this is like the MVP, right? This is the MVP of our product, that I don't even have to mention that, oh, explain, I don't even have to write, this is a layer that abstracts from me always having to write, explain how you would explain to a 10-year-old, or explain with a real world example so that I can really understand these questions. This is already part of your prompt engineering. So that's what these app layers do. So the prompt, sorry, go ahead.
No, you finish.
Okay, so the prompt is where actually picked up the images from GPT papers. I've produced the GPT papers a little, but just I'm not, I don't want to digress, but just want to add to it here is that even what ChatGPT does internally is you see a UI where you're asking it this whole question, right? Write a feedback for, I personally use it for, I write my whole data and I'll be like, make it sound more business, make it sound more diplomatic because I'm anything but that. So now when I give it this whole text with all of this, it's not that the model is actually reading the whole text as it is and just giving me back the answer. There is a whole application layer that goes in between, correct? So when I give ChatGPT the whole text, it picks on the context that I'm giving. It picks on when I say, write it diplomatically, write it in a more professional manner. It's picking on these keywords, and these keywords becomes the input to the model. So what it calls is prompt. So what it does in these prompts is there is this notion. There's also this. I would highly recommend watching that video because the images do more justice. You kind of understand what they're talking about. And there's another article I will post on Discord server because they have also picked actual images from the GPT papers. But it also says the mood. One of the inputs is also mood. Happy, sad, disgruntled, scorned, God knows. And then the keywords here that I want to leave. In your case, I want this question, right? So this is the question. Some keywords like physics, maybe, correct? Another prompt is beginner level, easy to understand language. So these become part of your prompts to the model. What it is also doing is that if I was to I accept everything. I accept images, I accept text. Then my application layer needs to start determining which endpoint do I call for a model, which is true for any ML-based application really. You pick your application layer picks which model endpoint should I call. So we have DALL-E versus we have text. If I have to generate images, my application layer should call DALL-E. It is pointless to call it with the other one. It would not work, right? So these prompts are what would be required by you. As a user, what I see is that I asked this question and it just gave me this answer. But internally what happened here, what would occur in your case and what happens in ChatGPT is it interprets your language, it picks keywords, it also, at least in case of ChatGPT, it also takes the whole context. By that, what we mean is, if you might have noticed, you go to ChatGPT and we have these tabs of all the conversations that you've had with it. And I've had this personal experience. I started a chat 5 days ago about something about C++, all right? And then I learned whatever I wanted to learn with it. And then I've had several other conversations, different tabs. I go back to my C++ tab, and it's really good at that, okay? Because now, just as a human, I'm you remember we spoke about C++, and you remember we spoke about this thing, didn't you? And I probably pasted an error. And I asked it a follow-up question after 5 freaking days, and it has the same answer we're just following this conversation up. How is that? That is because it has a database where it is storing your entire conversation history. So every time when you're asking it a follow-up question and you think that, wow, this model has a better memory than I do, it does because it gets all of that text back. So, of course, every time the answers might probably get a bit slower. Of course, then there's the whole cache caching mechanism and what you have, but think about like going back to the tab after a few days, and you will see that the first response to your conversation is a little slow because it needs to read the whole context exactly, the whole context, get the whole, like read all the text that it has had conversations with, now pick the prompt as to what I need to come up with next, right? So you were going to say something and we never got a chance to.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how to build this application. So there are two set of things that you can do, and I can explain my understanding.
Okay.
So again, there are two set of, again, I'm just putting things in bucket, right? Two kind of things that you build, right? One is you have this model and it has some knowledge, right? Which is a weight, that is, right? And you're not doing anything extra. You're just saying, I'm going to use the knowledge that you have. I'm just going to keep constrained it, and we're going to give you constraints how you can answer it, right? So in this case, okay, the constraint I'm giving is you have this really complex physics questions, but I want you to answer always as a fifth grader. So for every question I ask you, I don't want to repeat. Oh, answer as fifth grader, answer as to a fifth grader, right? So that's kind of a constraint I'm giving. That one set of kind of applications. The second set of applications is you have this knowledge, right, which is good, but I want to give you some additional knowledge, right? But I do not want to because training these models takes a lot of compute, a lot of time, right? I don't want you to modify. I want to build on top of your knowledge, right? Maybe give you this little bit extra more, and then I want to constrain you to use this thing as a context to answer this question, right? So the example she gave in context of maybe the Nike or the Chevrolet, because let's say Chevrolet has some proprietary information which is not available on the internet, so the model is not trained on top of it. Now, as Chevrolet, I don't want to retrain the whole GPT-4, but I want to give this additional knowledge, this additional context, and then I want you to answer on these things, right? So these are the two bigger buckets of things, right? So now let's talk about the first bucket of the question, where I am not giving you new knowledge, but I want to constrain, I want to put some sort of a constraint. So whenever you're writing any, pick any model, pick Llama, pick Gemini, pick OpenGPT, right? Sorry, ChatGPT, OpenAI model. They have a different syntax, but at the core, the context is there are three set of prompts that you have. One is called system prompt, one is called user prompt, and one is called assistant, right? User prompt is whatever we go into ChatGPT and say, what's the color of the sky? That's as a user that I'm asking, right? Assistant prompt is whatever the ChatGPT or the model responds to. And system prompt is whatever is a constraint. Oh, whenever a user asks you any question, just give me answer as a fifth grader. So that is kind of the system constraint that you have given. And then you can go ahead.
So the assistant prompt, is that also something you provide as an input?
No, that's kind of a response. But the example that you took that for the C++, right? So now let's say I gave a system prompt, always answer as a fifth grader, right? You ask a question and the assistant responds. Then you ask a follow-up question. And then assistant responds. Now what happens is, now this is kind of becoming the context. So when you ask the next question, it's going to take this whole thing as an input to say this is what the context is building. And that's where whenever you what it is talking about is what's the kind of the history that it can pick, right? Because keeping this history, processing through the model is also expensive. So if a model has only 4K sort of as a token, like if you remember the old GPT-2, GPT 2.5, right? It has a 4K context memory. It takes only last, again, I'm just oversimplifying it, means it can take only last 2000 context, 2000 tokens. If they say, oh, my model has a 10K or 16K or 32K sort of token memory, then it can take more context as an input.
I think they do allow parameter tuning also, how many levels you want to go in the search.
Yeah, again, then there are
the response. So if you use higher,
agree.
And if you tune it to less, it will respond quickly.
Oh, and that is as part of using the API.
Yeah, using the GPT itself. You can
right. So this is one kind of application where the constraint that you are giving is only by the system prompt or the prompt that you are giving, right? And you can interleave this based on to the right. The second kind of thing is this process to give an additional sort of context called fine tuning, right? So in fine tuning, what you do, You take their proprietary questions and answers, right? What they do is that they will feed that information to ChatGPT. They will just run through the same training model again. Now, the constraint with fine tuning is, or which is kind of an expected constraint, that you don't change the original model weights, because in that case, everyone who is using the model could also get information about Chevrolet, right? But we don't want that to happen because it's proprietary information. So it basically creates a layer of the weights which is outside of the original model, but kind of an addition. And that's how you can basically find it to answer or build your specific application which has this additional knowledge.
So in that case, can you like build a layer wherein, like you mentioned, there is like a model that is trained specifically on Chevrolet's data,
Yes.
and it takes the response and like takes that as an input to its model and tailors the answer.
No, so how it works is that in that case, you are getting this as one model and then you're building your application here.
Oh, so it actually allows you to build your own version of the model.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. So, for example, the example that you gave about your Instagram profile and other things, you are actually going through this route.
Oh,
that's my
that.
guess. Yeah, you are going through this route because then you are giving some system constraint, some sort of a constraint to the model.
True.
Right. It may be possible that internally they are taking those prompts and generating a dynamic model like this. Could be possible, but this is a more likely scenario.
Right. So in this example of when we are trying to come up with like a model
Yes.
that can consume questions and provide answers, even there I think it would be more like a prompt, right? In addition to more learning, so you can like have your own database where you're understanding who your user is, what kind of a history they have with your understanding, and what kind of answers they
Kind of, depending upon how you are building it. So, for example, let's say I am a coaching center, right? And I have my proprietary set of questions, and I have my special professors who have come up with a simpler level of answers, right? There is one simpler level of answer that GPT can generate, but I may not be happy with it. I have my own sort of corpus of questions and how to build simple thing. Then what I can do is that I can fine tune the model and create the small things. So only people who subscribe to my NET or whatever course, they can get it, right? Because doing this here will be very, very complex. Because here you can give generic system prompts. You cannot say, oh, for this question, this is the way easy to explain it. But here you can do it.
also retrain or fine tune the model.
It is defined. Again, you're not touching the original model. You're building basically a layer on top. So you had a question.
So, is it like, supposedly I use this particular application, the question application, and maybe it has like a mode or it says, or is it the moderator, sorry, the teacher? So all of this would be considered as a system prompt, or would that be considered?
That will be
as a
system
user prompt, or that is also considered, that will be like a user setting?
That will be called a system prompt. So all the user settings you will store somewhere in the database, but then you will generate a system.
So you have to prompt is also a user provided information, not.
Depending upon how you want.
It depends, right? Now, if you know, like if you are storing user information, and let's say like as part of the sign up, you are providing yourself a profile that I'm a teacher, I'm a student. So now that information, as a user, you do not always have to keep providing it. Or maybe like if you want it more generic, you could have like, let's say you have two buttons on the top, and they can toggle between what mode I want to be in, right? So then that becomes part of your application. The user doesn't necessarily have to prompt it. So either you're storing it as a user information and always using that to like how recommendation systems work, right? You want it more tailored to the user, or then you have it as an application input itself. But eventually it will still feed into the system prompt, correct?
So should we want to use like hit responses from different models based on the prompts, like segregate, like if the question is being related to physics, hit a different model which is dedicatedly trained on the physics set of questions, and if it is related to maths, hit a different model.
Yeah. Okay, so let me tell you, like in my understanding of again Andre Kalapati, who is the OpenAI's he has said that's like OpenAI. He has a really nice couple of hours video on how you can build your own LLM from scratch, right? With a very small set and own neural network. So I highly recommend watching it because it will clear up your context, right? At a very core, what is an LLM, right? Large language model. It just says, give me this text, I will do this matrix multiplication of these weights and I will generate an answer. It knows everything about internet, right? And then it also, there's some randomization happening. That's why you don't get always the same answer, right? So in your case, whatever specific things that you want, right? For example, if you are okay, a model having physics knowledge and chemistry knowledge, and you're having some sort of a leakage between these two concepts, somehow if there is a linkage. If you are open with that, then yeah, create one corpus of mix of physics and chemistry questions, fine tune based on both the sets, right? But if you want, okay, no, I don't want leakage. I want just very focused based on physics, or I want very focused on chemistry. Or I'm very focused on 10th grade physics versus 12th grade physics, right? You can create different fine tune models, right? That way, there is no sort of a leakage across these ways, because essentially it's just doing math.
The OpenAI papers, right, GPT-3 and 4, and maybe even the transform attention is all you need. They talk about how to train it, right? So it's like you use a body, they train it on the pile and the Common Crawl and then Wikipedia. So what would be, I think, a better approach would be you trained it on a core data set, and you can use the body-head relationship of the transformer system to essentially add the specializations you want, and you can re-engineer that, or you can retrain with a new head later, and then prompt it for things like, maybe, you know, in chemistry, right? Do you want the formula, or do you want the actual molecular diagram? Like that would be an example of a kind of prompt I feel like.
Yeah. Again, at the end, it is just matrix multiplication, right? However, how many layers you want to build, you can build on top.
Yeah, I think that to its core. Like one thing that we probably discount for is that it's not really understanding language the way we understand it. It is just weights and numbers, and then
like two courses that when I sort of watch them, my understanding of these things. One is this MBAC is how to build your own small neural network, an LLM, and there is a free Harvard course, CS50. Right? It's on YouTube, and you can just go to at free course there, CS50. Really awesome. Again, I was not to finish it because at the end I got bored.
Is it tailored to LLM or ML, like deep learning?
It's for AI and ML.
AI and ML.
Yeah, but both of these things, it will really give you the basic fundamental knowledge.
Yeah. But no, this was helpful. Thanks, Sunil. Like for adding this information, it was very helpful for sure. So technically, we did what was like one thing we were discussing is right, like that if we want to build a system that uses the model and like brilliant explanation as to what are the different ways we can approach to build your own system. You fine tune to like your own data and make it very specific, or then you try to govern it more through prompts and then your layers of moderation. And then this is again a design choice that we would have to think about and discuss. What, like I think you mentioned in some place, right, that in some systems, like in some of the applications, it is harder to fine tune the system prompt versus you were better suited to just like tune the model itself versus some places you don't need it. So you say so.
So there's one more like aspect of getting information, right? So one is finding like asking collecting the answer. And this is where you just add a prompt and you get the answer from it. There's another RAG architecture, like you know, retrieval augmented generation, right? You just provide the document, and ChatGPT is great at summarizing and understanding information. So based on the question, you just find a similar document that you added. For example, car manuals for Chevrolet.
Okay.
ChatGPT won't have the answer, the information. So that's when if I ask how to turn on the AC in the car, it's going to retrieve a document that is provided to it and then summarize it for you. So you don't need a fine tuning there, and you also don't need, like, you're also not using the exact knowledge of ChatGPT. You're providing additional knowledge to that. That RAG architecture.
So in the RAG architecture, as you mentioned, do you like, so to actually, do you mind coming here and summarizing what you just mentioned? Because it's also, we are streaming it, so it's going to be easier. You would do a better job than me summarizing what you just mentioned. Yeah, go ahead. The market.
So basically, here we have a LLM, right? You are asking a question, it's giving you an answer, right? Then there's second system where what he explained, right? You have an LLM and you fine tune it, right? You, let's say, instruction fine tune it, you get an answer. But this might be inadequate, this might be too much.
right? So here there's this system where you have the question, you have the LLM, will get the answer, but whatever your question is, it will try to get a set of docs, which will be tailored application to the set of your questions, right? And then it will provide that along with the prompt.
Oh, so you provide the document as well to the LLM. So,
Along with the prompt,
okay,
yes.
okay.
And
So my
that's-
architecture will actually do the doc retrieval, right?
The
Right.
application part.
Our application, the application part will do the doc
doc
retrieval.
retrieval. It will provide the doc retrieval to the LLM, and then it will summarize along with that information.
But like, does it provide the doc as a system prompt, or how does it provide to them?
It's a user prompt. Actually, we store convert these documents
To vectors.
tokenizers and put it in a vector database. And we go and search from the vector database and send the top X results.
So it's like an embedding search.
Oh, so you give the embedding. So as a prompt to the LLM, the embedding is a part of your prompt to the LLM then?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So you
So is it like a search engine? I mean, it's basically like a Google,
It's a-
right? Like you ask for a question.
Right, but you don't-
First, then link.
correct. So, but your application is going to be very tailored, right? Chevrolet car manual, right? Just imagine that.
But like your answer from the LLM is still not going to be just, so your whole application will not, so what he's saying is that this is an alternative to the fine tuning bit of it. Or this is an alternative to the first two options that Navneet mentioned is wherein you have your, like you said, so like I as Chevrolet have all of my models, correct? And I want the answer to be tailored to my manuals. So what I'm giving to, so what I'm doing at my end is some pre-processing, wherein I have all of my models into embeddings, converted into embeddings. So I interpret the question. So I have a separate application there that interprets the question, pulls out the right embedding, and then when I call the LLM, I say, here is the question, this is the prompt, and here is additional information that I'm providing you. So consume this information and my prompt, and then give me a tailored response.
And the question would also be embedded, so it will find the most relevant documents from the set of documents you provided.
So who finds the most relevant document or part of the
Our
document?
application.
It's you can like code it like a k-means, like a just a.
So our application would do that. Like the application layer would do that. The document finding would be done by the,
Like
yeah,
a
I think K-nearest is one of the best options.
K-nearest cosine similarity, you can use anything. You embed your question, you embed the documents that you provide. You find the most similar documents, you provide it to the LLM, you add a prompt, you get the answer.
So, but the LLM doesn't know about the any documents, right?
No, it gets it as an input.
System and
LLM doesn't know about the documents, the embedding part will just retrieve the right document and provide it as a prompt.
So your input, the document is an input itself. Just like she provided the book cover. So let's say I have a question and the book. So who killed whom? And I give a Sherlock Holmes book. So as a user, the user is just asking, like, assuming that my website is only for Sherlock Holmes. So who killed Watson, right? And I provide the storybook in which Watson got killed and this question. LLM will interpret it all as a request and then give a
So
response.
in your case, like you provide all your Instagram posts that you have done. So, and then you ask a question, so this is my style. Then the model
Thank
will
you.
kind of understand.
Thank you. That is brilliant. I'll do that.
Yeah, so that's how that will work.
That is brilliant. But then in this case, I think in your experience, at least from what you've read, would latency be a concern?
No, I mean, it is a concern, but embedding and search is like so advanced now, it's like.
No, but even the latency for the LLM to consume it and come back.
Yeah, it depends on the
Like,
mode.
it's already providing us vectors, so it already has the knowledge of it.
No, it's still in the content of 13K tokens.
Yeah, trying to parse.
Right, so input tokens will be and so how big your document is, what are you retrieving, how much you're retrieving, it's a design question.
That's a design concept, but that's a brilliant way to think of like designing an application,
Yeah,
right?
so how, like Claude, like for example, 2.1 has 200K input token length. So it's
Oh.
like the biggest I've seen so far, but it depends again, how much latency, and the bigger the input prompt, the output latency is also going to increase.
So I think with 4 they increased it from 3.5, right? Like that's why they're also charging us money.
Yes,
They increased from 4K to 32K. That's correct, right?
Yeah, so that
Oh, but
was-
thank you. This is absolutely helpful. So we do have like 3 types of. I did not come on with all this information. So thank you so much for all like this additional information. But what we have now also understood is that if someone actually tells you at work, like generate an application, you probably have a better understanding of what option we would pick. Of course, there are like more nuances to it that we have to educate ourselves with, but this I think is like very helpful for all of us. So thank you, Navneet, thank you. And thank you for the first input itself. Like this is helpful for a great conversation. So this kind of concludes everything that I knew and everything new that I learned today. Thanks to everyone else over here. We might, like, I will try, I would definitely come and share the knowledge with all of you here. All right.
Thank you. So we want to these kind of sessions every month. If anyone wants to sign up for, I think April or May, let me know. And we want to continue. I think few days back we did this Tinder thing, which was like end-to-end design system. This is, I think, more like a topic thing. And we want to do more like these. So these sessions should be more diversified. We just not stick to solving only good questions, but more knowledge sharing. And with this, we have a mentoring session next week. You want to pitch something or?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, yeah. So we have a mentoring session next week. Navneet could give a very quick elevated pitch.
Can you stop it?
Sure.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Navneet, engineering manager at Meta.